In this final video, I'd like to do two things. First, I want to wrap up the course with a sort of bird's eye view of sociological social psychology. And second, I want to talk briefly about a few things I think will be important for the field in the future. In undergraduate courses, the focus is almost always on what is well understood. Every theory that we have covered in this course is a well-tested, mature theory. Each one of them has been the subject of intense scrutiny and experimental testing, and each theory has been refined and improved since its initial formulation. This is no accident. The purpose of this course was to introduce you to a way of thinking about society and to illustrate the scientific knowledge that social psychology has produced. But social psychology is not finished. There is still a great deal of research happening. And while we're not going to go into detail about any of the nascent work within the field, I do want to introduce two things I think are going to be important in the future. But before we do that, let's look at sociological social psychology as a whole. In this course, we covered a lot of theoretical areas, ranging from theories that focused on how people understand and interpret the world around them, to theories that explained how groups cohere and function. All of these theories we examined have two important points in common. First, social psychology theories always concern themselves with connecting macro and micro. For example, social structure and personality sets out a goal of connecting the two as one of the primary activities of theory. Status characteristics theory assumes that status is imported from the broader society into interpersonal interactions, a link from macro to micro. And both identity theory and affect control theory use symbolic interaction assumptions to explain how individuals understand themselves and situations as part of a broader social system. Common to all of these examples is an effort to unite the larger features of society, things like institutions and organizations, social norms and mores, social groups like class, race, and gender, and the structure of social networks, with the day-to-day features of individual experience and interaction. The link between larger features of society and individual experience is what makes this type of social psychology sociological. The second thing that these theories have in common is that expectations appear as a phenomena in almost every social psychological theory. When people are interacting with others, they reliably form expectations about those interactions. Expectations include ideas about what is likely to happen in the future, what others in our social system are like, how others should behave, and what the outcomes of social interactions will be like. Expectations are something of a unifying feature in social psychology. When we theorize about how individuals interact with society, expectations are the tool that we have to link macro and micro processes together. Macro features of society are what allow people to form expectations about interactions that they have. And many of our theories deal with describing how expectations regulate interpersonal interactions or self-concept. Theories also deal with what happens when those expectations are violated. So, when you want to think about how society and the individual are related, think about how expectations of individuals are influenced by society. Okay, so that's two things that all social psychology theories have in common. We're trying to connect the individual to society, and expectations formed by individuals are a consistently useful way to do that. So, what's new in social psychology? Well, there's a lot going on in the field, but here are two things that I think are going to be very important in the future. You've probably noticed that networks play an important role in social psychology. But with a few exceptions, social psychology theories have not adequately dealt with large or complex social networks. Usually networks are kept simple and researched in the form of ego networks, so a network that focuses on one person and all of their connections, or small networks consisting of 4 or 5 people and their connections. But nobody exists in this kind of extremely simplified network. The reason networks have been kept simplified like this has more to do with methodology than theory. The features of complex networks are often very difficult to calculate, demanding enormous computational resources and a lot of time. Just to give you a sense of the scale we're dealing with, say you want to calculate the total number of possible connections between 1 million people. The formula for that calculation is n times n minus 1 divided by 2, where n is the number of people in the network. So 1 million times 999,999 divided by 2 gives us 499,999,500,000 possible connections between 1 million people. That's a lot. That calculation is easy, but algorithms that look at other important features of networks, so things like cohesion, reachability, path analysis, group embeddedness, all of these are computationally expensive. They take a long time to run, even on moderately sized networks, and they don't deal with large scales gracefully. Now think about the fact that there are several cities in the US that have over 1 million residents, and that the US itself has about 330 million residents. You can see the scale of the problem. Okay, maybe social psychologists don't need to think about national level networks, but it is the case that you exist within a network that is larger than just the people you're directly connected to, and that fact does matter for social interaction. At this point in history, we now have access to computers that are powerful enough to grind through the massive amounts of linear algebra demanded by network analysis at this scale. With the rise of social media, along with corporate America's penchant for recording and storing every mundane detail about every human in existence, we also have a lot of data on complex, large networks. So I think social psychologists can start looking at more complex networks in the future. I also think that this means that future social psychologists are going to need to be more computer literate. From data collection and preparation all the way to analysis, almost all social network analysis requires fluency in some programming language. So if you want a career analyzing society, you'll benefit from learning how to program. Take a few computer science courses. Another interesting but perhaps less appreciated development within social psychology is the connections of biological processes to social processes. Evolution and biology both play a role in social organization. We have evolved as social beings, and our ability to understand and perceive the world around us depends on our sensory and cognitive organs, namely our brains. And both negative and positive life course experiences can drive biological outcomes. Society can impact both mental and physical health, and how we understand society is dependent on neurology. So the relationship between biology and society is an important one. But sociology has historically been suspicious of biological claims about the social world. This suspicion is due largely to the fact that in the past, biology has been used as a justification of the marginalization and oppression of minority groups in society. This kind of justification is known as scientific racism. Scientific racism is the use of scientific concepts or ideas to justify a racist system. But scientific racism is not an inevitable conclusion of integrating biology and social research. It is reasonable to guard against the unwarranted conclusions brought about by scientific racism, but understanding how biology and society interact will lead to fruitful discoveries. Some of those discoveries have been made right here at Kent State. The InLock lab, run out of our sociology department, uses electroencephalography to research, among other things, the neurological processes that underlie interactions in small groups. In other places, researchers have used biological markers of stress to measure and assess the effects of structural and intergenerational discrimination of African Americans. So biology can play an important role in our understanding of social psychological processes. And there's a lot of potential in exploring the interaction of biology and society. You know, we have barely scratched the surface of social psychology in this course. Because of the truncated schedule, we were only able to cover the basics of each theory, and I've had to leave a lot of interesting theories out of our discussion. But I do hope that I've given you some insight into how social psychologists think about the social world. I also hope that you can see how useful these theories can be. We can actually explain a lot of what is happening in the world right now using social psychology. And that's one of the reasons I've asked you to think about theoretical applications in your final paper. What can you explain with what you've learned about social psychology? Okay, that's all I have. I do hope that you've enjoyed this course, and maybe I'll see you in the future.